granting me the opportunity to speak, and also Bob.
This meeting is being recorded.
And also Bob. So let's get into it. As members of Amnesty International, you all understand something very essential in that human rights are not abstract ideals, they're lived realities. They're protections that must be defended, enforced, and reimagined again and again. Black History Month is not just a time to remember the past, it's a time to confront the present. It invites us to reflect on one of the longest and most instructive human rights struggles in modern history, on how far we've come, and also on how far we still have to go. At its core, Black history is a human rights story, a story of people demanding dignity, equality, and the simple right to live freely and safely. It's also a reminder that the fight is not confined to one country or one era. It's truly global, it's ongoing, and it demands vigilance. When we talk about human rights, we're talking about the basic freedoms every person deserves. Freedom from violence, so equal protection under the law. Freedom to learn, the right to education. Freedom to work, the right to pursue happiness. Freedom to vote. A basic tenet of democracy is one man, one vote for all citizens in free and fair elections. And freedom to be treated as fully human. For Black Americans, descendants of slaves, these rights were denied for centuries, fought relentlessly, and even today are not still guaranteed equally. And to understand our present condition, we begin with the past. So for over 250 years, slavery in the U.S. was not just a social system, it was legal, a legal one, protected by the government. Black people were considered property, stripped of any bodily autonomy, familial bonds, education, or any protection under the law. This was a complete denial of human rights. Even after slavery formally ended in 1865, freedom did not bring equality. The Jim Crow era that followed through Jim Crow laws, mostly in the South, they enforced segregation and racial terror across the country. Black Americans were denied the right to vote, access to quality education, the ability to live where they chose, or receive equal treatment in the justice system. Violence, especially lynching or hanging, was used as a tool of control, often with absolutely no legal consequence for the perpetrators. Human rights were not just merely ignored, they were openly violated, and those violations were celebrated. I'll take you to pictures of people eating and smiling beneath a hung body in a tree. We have these pictures historically for lynching throughout the country. It was a time of celebration to do things like that. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s was a human rights movement at its core, right? So leaders framed racial justice as a moral issue, right or wrong. Everyday people put their lives on the line to demand basic human rights. Every movement has its spark, and for the civil rights movement, the spark was really the murder of Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy who had left his mother in Chicago while visiting family in Money, Mississippi. And he whistled, the saying was that he whistled at a white woman in a store that primarily catered to or was in an area that was patroned by Blacks. The key was that his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, insisted on an open casket and allowed media like Jet Magazine and others so that the world could see what they did to her baby. We see time and time again that technology is what really helped to communicate these atrocities to a larger audience that gained the support that sparked movements towards change. Then came more organized protests, like the Montgomery bus boycott, which Rosa Parks initiated through her refusal to give up her seat on the bus. This was about dignity and respect for your fellow man. Later were legal victories, like the 1954 Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education, which declared segregated schools unconstitutional, affirming education as a fundamental human right, and the passing of laws like the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was designed to enforce the 15th Amendment and eliminate discriminatory voting practices like literacy tests and poll taxes that had prevented Black Americans from voting or even registering to vote. This proved that change was possible, but it did not end inequality. It just transformed. And so the systemic barriers still remain, and the fight for human rights evolved. Let's start with something seemingly technical, but deeply rooted in fairness that we've experienced recently across the country: redistricting. The process of drawing the lines of congressional seats. It might sound like dry political math, but when maps are drawn in a way that dilutes the voting strength of Black or other minority communities, it effectively makes some people's voices weaker than others. There was a Republican-led effort here in Texas that pushed to redraw maps so that one party gained a bigger advantage through breaking up communities that traditionally voted for Black or brown candidates or represent Black or brown populations. That matters because representation, having people who look like you, who understand your lived experience, and who can champion your interests, is a human right in the sense that it protects your ability to influence decisions that shape your life. When maps are drawn to minimize the power of Black, brown, minority voters, it makes it harder to hold power accountable, and easier for injustices to persist unseen. These are echoes of tactics from the past in modern form. When access to the ballot is restricted, democracy itself is weakened. Another issue showing up today is the removal of DEI programs, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, through an executive order, right? So terminating programs that focus on encouraging diversity and addressing inequities in hiring and opportunity. It may seem like a policy shift, but it really reflects political choice about what kinds of truths we acknowledge and what kinds of people we choose to uplift. When we remove intentional efforts to center historically excluded groups, we remove tools that help address the long shadow of discrimination. You see, justice just doesn't happen because we stop discriminating. It requires active work to correct the imbalances left by centuries of exclusions that were permissible legally. Now let's talk about something that we know by its old name, food stamps. It's now called SNAP. And SNAP is supposed to be a safety net, a way to make sure families can feed their children when times are hard. Recent political fights over benefits have made the safety net feel less secure for millions. A major law reshaped how SNAP works, cutting benefits by billions of dollars and tightening work requirements for adults without dependents. Rules that did not exist before and that caused families to lose support even when they still struggle to make ends meet. On top of that, federal officials even said that they might withhold SNAP funds from entire states unless those states provide data about recipients, which punishes people simply because of where they live or who they choose to elect. In the background of it all, there is this very real fear that people who qualify legally for SNAP may be cut off entirely. And make no mistake about it, access to food is a basic human rights issue. When millions of people who work hard, who pay taxes, raise children, can't count on regular meals, something fundamental has gone wrong. And when politics interferes with access to food, we have to ask ourselves whose rights are being protected and whose are being put on hold. These three examples, so representation, equitable opportunity, and basic sustenance, they might sound different, but the story they tell is the same. They are all about who gets included in the promises our society makes and who gets left behind. When we think about human rights, these aren't small spats over policy. These are decisions that shape whether a family gets a full plate at the table, whether a community's voice in Congress counts, and whether a young person sees a future where they have a fair shot, not because they're lucky or they were born into it, but because justice demands it. One of the most haunting reminders of the legacy from Emmett Till came in 2012. So with the killing of Trayvon Martin, an unarmed Black teenager whose death ignited national outrage. Many saw in his death not just a tragic event, but a clear example of how racial bias in systems of law enforcement and the justice system can cost Black lives. Black Americans are incarcerated at disproportionately higher rates, often for nonviolent offenses, and frequently receive harsher sentences than their white counterparts for the same crime. In 2020, the murder of George Floyd at the hands of police officers with a knee on his neck, it became a global symbol of state violence. In city after city around the world, people chanted, "No justice, no peace." And it was not just in solidarity with Black Americans, but in solidarity with human rights everywhere. The right to life and security of person enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was violated in broad daylight, witnessed on phone screens, and by many bystanders around the globe. Rights that should never depend on one's skin color. We saw history repeat itself in Minnesota, Minneapolis, on January 7th, when a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent shot and killed Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old mother of three, after federal forces conducted an immigration operation in the neighborhood of Minneapolis. And then within a few short weeks later, another federal confrontation resulted in the fatal shooting of Alex Pretty, right? So this shows that state violence and impunity can take many forms. It is not only police, officers on local streets. It can be federal agents responsible for immigration enforcement. It is not only people of one particular age or background. It can be mothers, neighbors, community observers, or bystanders caught in the machinery of law enforcement. The response to these incidents show that the struggle for human rights transcends one community, one nation, or one tragedy. Education, too, remains unequal. Schools in predominantly Black and brown communities are often underfunded, overcrowded, and under-resourced. While segregation is illegal, many of those schools today are just as racially divided as they were decades ago. If education is a human right, then unequal access to it is a modern form of injustice. Economic inequality tells a similar story. The racial wealth gap created by decades of housing discrimination, legal housing discrimination, unemployment bias, legal employment bias, and exclusion from wealth building opportunities continues to limit access to health care, stable housing, and economic security. These are not privileges. They are human rights tied to survival and dignity. Movements like Black Lives Matter remind us that the struggle for human rights is ongoing. These movements are often misunderstood as divisive, but their message is simple. Black lives deserve the same value, protection, and respect as all others. Saying Black Lives Matter does not diminish anyone else. It demands inclusion and a promise of human rights. Black History Month challenges us not to sanitize history, but to learn from it honestly. It teaches us that progress is never automatic. Rights are not simply granted. They are demanded, defended, and protected by ordinary people who refuse to accept injustice. It means recognizing that history is not over. We are not just observers of the civil rights story. We are participants in its next chapter. Whether through education, advocacy, voting, or simply challenging injustices we see, each of us has a role to play. Black History Month is not only about celebrating achievements, it's about honoring responsibility. Responsibility to remember, responsibility to show up, responsibility to speak up, and responsibility to act. The fight for civil rights never really ends. It changes shape, it moves into new arenas, and shows up in places that we might not expect. In ways maps are drawn, in programs we choose to eliminate, and the benefits we decide should or should not be available. The true measure of progress is not how inspiring our history sounds, but how just our present becomes. And so let us honor the past by living with purpose in the present. Let us teach our children their worth. Let us support one another in unity. Let us speak truth with love to power. Let us build where others try to tear down. Let us vote with conviction. And let us stay ever vigilant and prepared to get into good trouble. For injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And with that, I thank you for your time and attention. Any questions?
Yes.
Thank you so much for your
Yes.
work.
Yeah.
Fred, that was
Well said.
extraordinary, well spoken and extraordinary. Mohammed's back. Mohammed, do you want to take back the lead now?
No, you're doing fine, Wally.
Okay. Okay. So I didn't. You certainly can put questions in the chat if you wish to, but I think this is a small enough party. If you can just raise your hand, either using the raise hand up marker on the on Zoom, or just hold your hand up. We'll get you. Bob Tomlinson already is ready to talk. Thank you, Bob.
Well, Fred reminded me of a book, and I think it was written by Marvin Dunn. It's called Florida History Through Black Eyes. Mr. Dunn is a professor in Florida, and he takes his classes every year around where all these black injustices have taken place, whether it was hanging, riots, what have you. And most of these took place in the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and what have you. Interesting book. Well, I was also I learned from there. I grew up in Florida, never knew any of this, even while I was growing up. But one of the things that was prevalent, they would find an excuse to have to go after black residents for some reason. But what it came down to, if that black person or a black person had a nice home, a lot of good land, that's what they were after. It wasn't that they felt aggrieved. They wanted to steal that property or the money or whatever that this person had or this group of people had. It's an amazing book, so I recommend that.
Roger, I see your hand up.
Yeah,
let me respond.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Respond to Bob.
Absolutely.
Because, the modern form of that may be as simple as people not paying their taxes and then being enforced unequally, right?
Yep.
The tactic that was used there was first used with Native Americans, right? And it hasn't gone anywhere. It's just taken a different form. And so we still see it today. We see it in people doing false deeds and selling people's properties that they don't own, right? And it takes those people, if they have resources and the wherewithal to fight that through the legal system, to get their property back. But there are very clear still targets on people that are vulnerable, I'll say it that way, in different communities for their land and their property.
Well,
Okay, Roger.
It's kind of funny you mentioned Emmett Till. I remember years ago I was at a play over at the University of Houston, and it was based on Emmett Till. And then the director said, we have a special guest here at the play. And he said, Mrs. Till was here. And Mrs. Till was sitting right behind me. When I turned around, I was looking dead at her in her face when she had come down here to see that play, Mrs. Till. So that was one thing. We're dealing with sometimes people just forget the history, and when you're adamant about different issues about history in the United States, and I went to the Hanging Museum in Montgomery, Alabama, and I strongly recommend that if you guys ever get an opportunity to go there and visit that museum, because it seems like almost all the states, southern states, have individuals that are actually hung for looking at a white woman or talking back to somebody, just simple things that would get you killed. So I would strongly recommend that you guys go and visit that if you haven't visited it yet. But it's a great place to go visit and learn about the history of one of our most hated times of history.
Fred, do you have a response or not?
It's not. I'm just I want to echo and I want to add some additional context. So one thing that I'm reminded of with Emmett Till, and in particular Mamie Till Mobley, is her age. She was in her early 30s when her son, her only son, was basically lynched. And I don't know what you were doing in your early 30s, but to have the wherewithal to carry yourself with class and dignity, to go to the trial every day and know that those people that did that were going to get off, then for them to tell the story of the truth afterwards, receive money and tell the truth afterwards. It took a lot of courage and a lot of maturity for someone in their early 30s to do what she did, and very grateful for people like her.
Yep.
But Fanima, you have your hand raised?
I just wanted to, there's a couple of things that I thought of right away as all of you were speaking. One is visiting the Hanging Museum. Duluth, Minnesota was the last one. So yay, Minnesota. We were definitely a part of that. But one of the things that it feels more real to me, like I can't remember who shared, if it was Howard or I can't remember who it was. Visiting history makes it feel more real and sacred, I think, for me. And in Minnesota, for example, the Whipple building that everybody's seen on the news over and over again with ICE, and that's where they were protesting in front of and stuff in Minnesota. Well, that's on Fort Snelling, and Fort Snelling is where the Dred Scott decision was made. And Dred Scott, that was the last place that he was held as a slave in bondage on that fort. And so going to that site and like trying to figure out where did he stay? Where did him and his wife have to stay because they weren't allowed to leave? And then the last thing I want to say is the other thing that I've done in trying to visit history is try to look at what locations are listed in the Green Book in my area and actually go to those places and just see. And up for Minnesota, there's only like 4 or 5. They're all gone, but the corners and there's things in their place. And it just I encourage you to check out the Green Book. You can usually Google it and visit one of those locations and keep that in your memory. That's the way to keep history alive.
Yeah, good point.
Can you tell them what the Green Book is? Can you share what the Green Book is?
Yeah, the Green Book is back in the day, there were not safe places for African American families to stay if they were traveling out of town. There was no rest stop for them to stop at, bathrooms, all of that. So a book was created that was basically like a phone book for the entire country that listed all the safe places for individuals to be able to stay if they were traveling.
Yeah.
Thank you. Look, I appreciate what you said. I'm reminded we're not that far removed. We're a lifetime away from integration, right? I mean, and the stories that I hear from my parents of some of their classmates going to, after integration, going to other schools and being the only ones that look like them, right? And then their teachers having to, teachers that they loved, that were there for years, that really had a common interest and wanted to instill in people that looked like them to be the best that they can be, were ripped from their schools and moved to other areas, and they got teachers that might not have cared as much, right?
Didn't care at all.
The Green Book is interesting because even today, I have to teach my child that you can't go everywhere. There are still in Texas, there are still Vidor, Texas comes to mind, places that were either not birthplace but a central force for the KKK. We still do not stop there to get gas to this day. I mean, I was taught that from my parents. I passed it to my child. You don't stop in Vidor, Texas.
Run them dry.
Where what was the
dragging
man's
drag,
name?
yeah, the drag that was drunk. Yeah, dragged to death.
He was
yeah.
right. There are just that's a modern thing that happened, right? That people still see, whether it's in more rural towns or in urban places that are more affluent, they still see blacks as less than because of their color of their skin. And we have to pass down that history. We have to have the talk about the police and what to do. When I got promoted in my job in sales, I travel the country. At first it was mostly by car, and they wanted to put me in an area, for me to home base. I was very vocal about where I would not live and why, and where it was safer for my base to be and where I should live. But if I didn't have that education, I would have been at risk. I'd have put myself in harm. So still, those things are very real and relevant to this day.
Yep.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Stay woke.
I think Howard had his hand up next, and then Julie after him. Yeah. Howard, are you muted?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. How much does Mr. Woods think this is about the inherent injustice in the system? In other words, if you have money and you can buy legal talent more than the other side, you can basically run the clock out. I mean, if you look at Trump's tactics and using the legal system, this is what he does all the time, And so race and things are used, but it's the legal system that really allows people to do really screwy things with two other people if they've got the money, And recently I ran into something, and it's just, bear with me a moment. It's called Vikings in America. And it talks about the fact that, of course, Christopher Columbus gets the credit for discovering the New World. But in fact, people from the Norwegian countries had been trading and dealing in the New World since 1000 AD. But the Vatican wanted to throw the credit to Spanish monarchs, and so they perverted, And so we're always talking about this in terms of race, but I wonder how much of it really is about screwy legal and or religious systems that people are playing political games with.
Fred, why don't you?
That's it.
Yeah, why don't you try to respond, please?
Yeah, so I'll give my opinion. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal scholar, but I study history and where did our legal system stem from, right? So we have a legal system and a government that models a European system. And what we know from that and monarchs, that it was primarily put in place to keep those that had less than in check, right? And to give recourse and avenues to get around the system for the powers that be. You talked about a book that talked about Vikings. Well, I was introduced to books that say that Africans also discovered the New World and were here long before Christopher Columbus. And so, even with history, how history is written, who history is written by, says who to promote as being the matriarchs and patriarchs, the founders, and it leaves out any semblance of anyone else.
Thank you. Julie, this will be the last question. We want to give Fahima enough time
Okay.
to talk.
My question is, I remember I remember Rodney King, and I think something that impressed me at the time was that people would not know about this if it wasn't for, someone had a camera. And my question is, do you consider modern social media, and that means people having cameras all over the place, constantly filming everything that's going on around them, do you think that is an asset in the fight for social justice, especially like police abuse or just in general?
So the short answer is yes. So that one technological advancement in taking picture, whether still or in motion, and being able to tell a story visually, superseded anything that we were saying for centuries, for decades, of how we were mistreated or how the police treated us versus others, or when we marched, the dogs or the hoses that were turned on us. When the world saw, and when people outside of the immediate area saw how Blacks were mistreated, whether it was through a nonviolent protest or other means, people responded. They acted. They could not. Yeah. They weren't seeing those images. And so again, the answer is yes. The camera, having pictures, whether still or in motion video, and then the internet just expands the reach and the access, right? So things like the internet, anyone can Google it or search for it, and it will come up in multiple forms, and everybody has that tool in their hand or in their pocket. Everyone has a phone now, right? So before, it had to be a photographer or someone with media. It was special. It was a special clearance or a special person. Now everybody has a camera and can video. You have cameras, that are on your cars now as you drive. So yes, I agree with that.
Okay, Mohammed, did you want to say anything before?
No, well, if Fred is gonna stay on, I will be quiet. If Fred has to leave, I just want to thank him for agreeing to speak, and I really enjoyed your talk, Fred. And if I lived in your district, I'll vote for you. But I know a lot of people who live in your district, so I'm gonna get them to vote for you.
Yes.
Sir, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Fred.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here and running.
Thank you.
Oh, blessed evening.
Okay.
Okay, Fahima, you thought maybe 20 minutes or so?
Oh, no, just a few minutes.
Oh, okay. Go
I
ahead.
want to share my screen, so there we go. Okay, there we go. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, pretend it says 26 because my brain still doesn't flip over to the new year yet. But my name is Famina. I'm our Senior Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Director for Amnesty. And so the majority of my work I look at as how can I help prepare our staff and our members so that they can be more effective in their activism and have a more fulfilling experience working for Amnesty. And so the things that you see me do in my work, a lot of training, of course, but things that really help us learn some of those aspects of inclusion and accessibility. So I'm here to talk to you about, I was invited, well, I kind of begged, Najim Adeleke allowed me to come and speak with you. He was a part of a work group that we put together that's worked for over a year in putting together peer dialogue circles. So if anyone is familiar with this, peer dialogue circles are, they stem from restorative justice work. in restorative justice work, a lot of times it's if an inmate wants to maybe sit down with the victims and apologize to a family, they put this circle together so individuals can have like a safe way for them to hear the message and for them to share their feelings. A majority of my work before coming to Amnesty has been in government. With the state of Minnesota, and a majority of that in the state of Minnesota was with the Minnesota Department of Corrections in the same type of work. And so I got to see peer dialogue circles work for staff and for inmates. A few years ago, Amnesty had a cultural assessment. I want to say Amnesty kind of had a miniature cultural reckoning. And this assessment was done and focus groups happened, and we were trying to figure out what are the things that we need to make Amnesty's culture more better, to make sure that people want to stay with Amnesty. If they're looking to work with Amnesty, that they look at this job as like their lifelong job, that their members look at this work as lifelong. How do we make sure that people have that experience? And the data that came back from the cultural assessment, they had a bunch of recommendations. And one of the recommendations that came out was that we, especially since COVID, that we needed to communicate better with each other, and that there was a loss of trust, particularly between members and members and staff. And so this is part of the reason why the member center was created. That was one of the things that came out of this. There used to be this D-list email that had some people on it and not others, and it would go back and forth. And so this member center was one of those things. My idea coming into the organization was looking at how can we handle our own, build our own relationships, handle our own conflict without it having to escalate to a point where more people are involved in it, or that people leave, or that it turns into a code of conduct issue. And so I have brought and put together peer dialogue circles. And so it's basically a gathering of peers. When I say peers, it was purely selfish. I got tired of typing out staff and members, staff and members, staff and members. And so I came up with the term peers so that I didn't have to do that anymore. But peer dialogue circles are run by peers. Peer facilitators have received training in intercultural conflict, as well as how to facilitate a peer circle. And the purpose of peer circles is really open to either relationship building, or if need be, it can help if there's any conflict that's happening. It's also a great opportunity for co-learning to happen. In some of your respective jobs, you might have heard of like employee resource groups. A peer circle could be an opportunity for a group to come together on a regular basis and talk about specific topics or things that are impacting, and being able to have that dialogue that I feel like we've lost since COVID and since we have this virtual world. It's great. You're talking to me from Minnesota, and there's somebody from Colorado, and that's wonderful, but something has been lost without that face-to-face. And so we have 3 types of circles for you. The majority of circles that you can request for your groups, they just need to be a group, basically like 3 or 4 or larger. And you can request a circle as a listening circle to just build relationships. Maybe you have some new members that you want, to kind of get involved in the group and everyone to get to know them. This is a way for you to do that. If it's a way of like strengthening relationships, maybe if there is some work that has been difficult to get through or get done, or some communication breakdowns. And so just coming together in a safe way that allows everyone to have that opportunity to speak. There's also current event listening circles. That's basically like if something like a shooting happens, or ICE, all those big current events that when they happen, you feel like you want to have that group of people to talk to. that are like-minded and be able to kind of get out, how this has impacted you. And this is a way for you to do that. And I would be leading those. And then repair circles. If there's actually a conflict and maybe, the group is divided into two teams, it's us versus them or whatever has happened, a repair circle will help mend that and help the group move forward. So a peer circle, it's called a circle because when it's in person, we literally sit in a circle. Sometimes they have talking pieces and all of that, but we also do it virtually. The majority of them, of course, are going to be virtual. Anybody can request a peer circle that's a part of Amnesty. It usually takes about 90 minutes to an hour, and that is because one of the magic things about peer circles is there is a specific order that's created for everyone to speak in, and you can't have that back and forth quite so easily, so you have to kind of wait your turn until everyone else has had the chance to speak. And because of that structure, it helps folks listen more, and it also helps folks be able to feel like they've had an equal chance to share. If there's been a circle requested, let's say for one of your groups, the person that requested it will ask, who would you like to be a part of the group? It's completely voluntary. You don't have to participate in a circle. If you decide to be in the circle and you don't feel like speaking, that's okay. Circles are not recorded. There's no documentation that's going to follow you around or anything. And it's not just if something went wrong. Circles can be really great things. Finally, with circles, the last thing I want to share with you is if you're going to AGM, we are going to be doing a rapid circle. Our Minnesota group is going to do a circle at a fireside chat. And our circle is going to be about ICE in Minnesota and how that's personally impacted some of our members. So you can actually, if you're not quite sure, is this going to be like kumbaya? Is this going to be, all wishy-washy? You can see how a circle works, how simple it is. It'll be a 10-minute circle. You can either participate in or you can just observe. And I encourage you to check those out and participate. In the meantime, if you are interested in a circle, you can let Najim know. He can let me know. Otherwise, idea@aiusa.org is a good way to get in touch. There's also some stuff on the Member Center I've put out for you as well. So that's my spiel about peer dialogue circles. Does anyone have any questions, or has anyone heard of restorative justice circles, had them at your workplaces or schools or anything like that?
I've seen them in the prison system.
Yeah.
I've seen that in the prison system. Yeah.
Yeah, they're quite effective, especially for juveniles. And I think there's what I learned with working with the Minnesota Department of Corrections is juveniles, their brains are more malleable. I can't say the word right. So they're more open to learning and change. And so they're extremely effective with the youth in that arena. But they also, I was amazed to see how well they worked with correction officers that were having issues with each other within the workplace, which can be dangerous. You don't want, to be upset at another officer and, give them a bad assignment or all those bad things that can happen. So, yeah.
Yep.
More questions? Mohammed?
And so this can be done virtually, or it has to be face to face?
Nope, it can be done virtually. We've done a couple of virtual sessions so far. We have 4 facilitators that we'll choose from. We have 2 that are members and we have 2 that are staff. So depending on the topic area that you're looking at, you'll get one of those facilitators. And we just basically we use the screen to move everyone around an immersive view. So it looks like we're like all sitting in a circle, but we're not.
Oh, okay.
So is there a hard and fast rule that everybody has their videos on?
No, it's strongly suggested, especially if we're talking about, and there'll be some community guidelines that will really encourage that, especially if someone's sharing something that's really private, and or really emotional. It'd be horrible if like everyone had their cameras off. But understanding that, you know, someone might need to step away for a moment. Maybe they're eating or they're taking prayer or something, where they can't have their camera on the entire time is perfectly fine. But we encourage folks to have it on, especially if someone's sharing something really impactful to them.
Question. Are people tried using this in technical design groups?
Say more. I'm not sure what you mean with technical design, like IT folks?
Yeah, IT would be one example. Aircraft and automotive design groups would be another. Um, the the reason I was thinking about it was that you have to you get people involved with controversial decisions that involve lots of money and different technical opinions, and you're trying to keep it down to a dull roar. And so I was wondering if people had tried this as a way of doing that.
You know,
The
I'm not sure about that, especially with the level of like the technical expertise that is needed. Um, I'm sure that there's been colleges and universities that might have used it. I can see folks using it in combination with like marketing or kind of working with groups that they're not typically involved with on a daily basis. So HR and IT together, because they're putting together something that would be great for a circle.
Yeah,
Thank you.
in response to Howard's question, I mean,
Yeah.
this is very similar to what we at work used to have, where if we're, designing something and we didn't want the designers, the engineers who are doing the design, coming up with the concept and all that, do it in a vacuum without involving the folks who will be manufacturing it and who
Yeah.
will be developing the assembly line for that. So we actually had these diversity groups that would have the folks who come up with the concept, the folks who do the design, the folks who do the manufacturing, the folks who develop the process to do the assembly line. All that would be in the same group, and everybody will bring their own expertise and their
Yeah.
experience into developing the product. This sounds very
Diversity.
familiar to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
the reason I brought it up was try to keep it short. The New Yorker has an article, New Yorker Magazine had an article called Claude, and it's about they sent a reporter to Anthropic to watch people build the large language models for 6 months. And
Mm.
what they found out was their biggest problem was they couldn't figure out how to keep them safe. All of their assumptions that each group made about how to build these things and not have them do the wrong things, they kept falling apart, you know. And right now, there's a big fight going on between them and the Pentagon because the Pentagon wants to grab the thing and use it. And they're saying, fine, you can use it, but you got to have some safety things. And the funny thing was their first assumption was we'll just all communicate and we'll let it look at the emails. Well, after a while, they found out that it could use the emails and classified information to blackmail various members of the design team. So that's when they realized they had to isolate the large language model. Okay. So I don't want to get, just saying that what you're talking about is nice for social issues, but it can also be crucial for doing design work where you don't want to do harm in the process of creating something. That's enough said. Thanks for you. Sure.
Yeah, and it makes me think about conversations that I've had to actually today about looking at Amnesty work and trying to look at risk level with authoritarian practices, giving people advice on what to do when they go out to protest. Is the advice that I give to African American women that are going out to confront ICE going to be the same as, someone else, maybe an Asian man? Like, going back and forth and making sure that we're getting all those perspectives and things like that. So for the purposes of
Mm-hmm.
your group, if you all you all seem like folks that love to conversate with each other. It can be as informal as that. It's not anything that needs to be very rigid, but it's there for you. I really want this program to be successful, and I think once someone sits through a circle, they'll see that it's okay, and it's actually kind of fun. But I'm an extrovert, so
Thank you.
thank you so much.